On the afternoon of June 18, 1940, 80 years to the day after the guns fell silent at Waterloo, a 55-year-old man rose in the packed House of Commons to tell the British people the truth no one wanted to hear, and yet somehow leave them more determined than ever to fight on. Because 3 days earlier, the swastika had risen over Paris, the French government had fled to Bordeaux, and the army that had once been hailed as the finest in Europe was disintegrating along roads choked with refugees, and now Britain stood utterly alone, separated from a continent under Nazi control by nothing more than 21 miles of grey water. And everyone in that chamber understood that the man speaking to them, Winston Churchill, barely 6 weeks into the job of Prime Minister, was about to define what survival would even mean. Churchill had taken office on May 10th, the very day Hitler's forces tore into the Low Countries and France, and his time as leader so far had been a relentless sequence of catastrophe. The retreat to Dunkirk, the agonizing evacuation of over 300,000 men from the beaches under Luftwaffe bombardment, the heartbreaking abandonment of nearly all their tanks, trucks, and artillery on French sand. And now, with France formally requesting an armistice that would be signed 4 days later, Churchill had to stand before Parliament and, through them, the entire nation listening on the wireless, and answer the only question that mattered: what comes next? He did not minimise the danger, he never did, because Churchill understood that false comfort was a luxury Britain could no longer afford, and so he laid out with brutal clarity the strategic disaster that had just unfolded, acknowledging that the Battle of France was over and that the Battle of Britain was about to begin. A phrase he chose with the precision of a man who had spent his life mastering language as a weapon, because in that single sentence he reframed catastrophe into a turning point, transforming a defeated continent into a single decisive contest that Britain could still win. He spoke of what was actually at stake, not merely the islands themselves, but the survival of Christian civilization, the continuity of institutions, the very existence of the British Empire. And he warned that if Britain failed, the whole world, including the United States, would sink into the abyss of a new dark arch made more sinister and protracted by the lights of a perverted science, a chilling allusion to the industrialized machinery of Nazi Germany that few listening could fully grasp yet, but whose meaning would become horrifyingly clear in the years ahead. Behind the rhetoric lay hard military reality that Churchill and his commanders were quietly grappling with, because the Royal Air Force, the instrument that would soon have to defend the skies, possessed barely 600 serviceable fighters, Hurricanes and the newer, faster Spitfires, against a Luftwaffe that could field well over 2,000 aircraft, including Messerschmitt Bf-109s, twin-engine bombers, and the feared Junkers Ju-87 dive bombers that had terrorized Poland and France. And the only reason Britain had any chance at all rested on a layered defensive system few outside government fully understood: the Dowding System, named for Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, which fused radar stations along the coast, ground observers, and a centralized command network to direct fighters with a speed and efficiency the Germans could not match. A quiet technological edge that would prove just as decisive as pilot skill or aircraft performance in the months ahead. Churchill also understood something the generals sometimes missed: that this war would be fought as much in the minds of ordinary people as in the skies above Kent and Sussex, and so his speech was engineered not just to inform but to steel, ending with words that would echo through the rest of the century: the assurance that if Britain could stand up to Hitler, all Europe might be free and the life of the world might move forward into broad sunlit uplands, but that if it failed, the whole world would sink into a new dark age. And then the line that gave the speech its enduring name that men would still say: this was their finest hour. It is worth remembering that Churchill was not universally trusted in June 1940. Many in his own Conservative Party had preferred Lord Halifax, who had quietly explored the possibility of a negotiated peace with Hitler through Italian intermediaries just days earlier, and the War Cabinet had argued fiercely over exactly this question between May 26 and 28, a debate Churchill ultimately won by insisting that any peace with Hitler would amount to enslavement. And the finest hour speech became, in effect, the public ratification of that private victory, a declaration that there would be no negotiation, no terms, only resistance. Within days, the practical consequences of that defiance became unmistakable. Fighter squadrons were repositioned, radar stations along the southern coast were brought to full readiness, and on July 10th, the date many historians mark as the opening of the Battle of Britain proper, German aircraft began probing British defences in earnest, beginning a contest that would stretch through the summer and into autumn, climaxing in the desperate days of late August and September, when young pilots, many barely out of their teens, flew 4 or 5 sorties a day until exhaustion blurred into something close to delirium. And ordinary Britons watched vapour trails twist overhead and listened to the distant thunder of aerial combat as a new kind of warfare, fought almost entirely in the sky, decided the fate of their nation. By mid-September, the Luftwaffe's failure to achieve air superiority forced Hitler to indefinitely postpone Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. And though the Blitz would bring nightly terror to London and other cities through the winter, the strategic outcome of that summer's air battle meant Britain had survived the most dangerous moment of the entire war, the one point at which Germany might have ended it by force before the United States or the Soviet Union ever entered the conflict. What makes Churchill's speech remarkable, looking back from the distance of more than 8 decades, is not simply its eloquence but its accuracy, because he had, in essence, predicted the shape of the war to come, a desperate defensive struggle in the air that would determine everything else. And he had given his country not false hope, but a clear-eyed reason to believe that survival was possible, provided they were willing to pay the price. And when the history of that war is finally written in full, it is this moment, a tired man addressing a frightened chamber on a June afternoon, refusing to disguise the danger, yet refusing equally to surrender to it, that stands as the true turning point, the instant Britain chose, with open eyes, to fight on alone, and in doing so, gave the free world the time it desperately needed to gather its strength.